Oh, there's only one way to get today's Beef Up Front episode started. And of course, that is a salute to our good friend, Mr. Mark Henry Jr. and all of the Fighting Irish fans from coast to coast. 28-point favorites. And they go down at home to open up the season in South Bend. Bring it on in for another edition of Beef Up Front. I am Sean Brace. He is Beef. Ryan Beef Coyle. Ryan, how we doing?
Awesome. Was saying earlier, on paper, wasn't like the sexiest slate, but I sat down at 2:30 on my friend's couch and didn't get up till I left around midnight, besides to get pizza or another beer or use the bathroom. So it was a great, entertaining day of college football, from the early window to the late window. Everything kind of delivered. It was a fun day.
Yeah. I stayed home, so I got the advantage there. I started at about 12:10. No. Okay, I lied. Yeah, because I played golf. So I was home right around that same time, but we bellied up to the bar at the clubhouse right around kickoff, right about 12:10, 12:15, whatever it was. And then I saw 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
2 a.m. Saturday night.
Yeah, we were talking about the Oregon game.
It was all because of Oregon.
Yeah.
It was all because of Oregon. Yes, Oregon. Boise State. Beef and I are straight up texting each other at 2 a.m. Ridiculous. Yes, it was. We will talk a lot about the Ducks and their upcoming game, and of course the two games that we've already seen. But Notre Dame, let's just start there, because Ryan, the big thing for me was, and I yelled about this on the Daily Ticket, about just the fact that, I get it, we all get so trapped into these predictions, and it's a new shiny object at the end of the yellow brick road. It's a 12-team playoff, and we all want to put this matchup out there. Dude, it's September 9th, and the team that everybody was talking about had such an easy stroll to the playoffs, and even more than that, talking about how they had an advantage and they were going to be home and they didn't have to deal with this. Dude, we got a long way to go. You can't predict this stuff. 28-point favorite. Nobody had them losing. Come on, man. Even that head coach who everybody's in love with right now from Northern Illinois, like, nobody had them losing outright, and they did. But, where do we go with the Irish right now? Because people are fired up about Freeman, and that's just inexcusable. You can't lose that football game if you're the head coach at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think this time last week they were minus 360 to make the playoff. Now they're plus 350 to make it. Like, it goes to show you, they were the greatest thing since sliced bread last week. Marcus Freeman was, he's the guy. He's got it figured out now. They're ready to go, and we're here this time this week, and the world's on fire in South Bend, pretty much. But inexcusable. I said earlier on my podcast, the old Dennis Green quote, they are who we thought they were. Last week, we were talking about them as a national title contender, a potential threat in the category of Georgia and Ohio State, in those teams. But really, they're Penn State. They're that second tier. They're that group that, if they potentially get in, and like, I think we're gonna have upsets throughout the year. Like, I definitely don't think Notre Dame season's done, but I do think, for sure, they want Northern Illinois to win out and win the MAC. Just make that loss look as good as possible if you're able to twist and turn it that way. But the one thing that can certainly be used against Notre Dame going forward, or that the fan base could probably complain about, is, well, we got to get into a conference. So if something like this does happen, we can still get into a conference title game and make it that way through the auto berth. Because no matter if they go 11-1 or not, the best that they can get is the 5 seed. Even if they went undefeated, best they could have got was the 5 seed. So just another new wrinkle of the playoff, and a pretty insane upset, because, as you said, no one saw that happening. I did see a lot of people on Northern Illinois plus 28, but no one had them going to South Bend and win outright.
Yeah, I did see people discuss that as well at 28-point favorite. And I don't know. Maybe it was a spot that they were looking well, of course, but from the wagering perspective going into that game, I know I didn't discuss it. It wasn't a game that I was looking at as far as taking, that's for sure. So I'm not sitting here saying that like I was on the right side. No, this is totally a Monday morning quarterback type deal here. But from the 28-point perspective, it's just, that's a lot of points. And then to lose outright, it's crazy. So I'm with you as far as where we go now with both of these teams, and who knows what happens with Northern Illinois. But I just think from Notre Dame's perspective and how, these teams are so quick to pull the trigger and just remove these coaches. I would be nervous if I'm Marcus Freeman. I would be. Be. I don't know. It was a great win at A&M, and I came away. I was impressed. I thought the defense looked really good. I thought, Riley Leonard was like an upgrade to a point, not so much, but he's a different style quarterback, and I like what he brings to the table as far as athleticism is concerned, and that's what they weren't getting last year. He picks up the tough yards, but man, like I said, just inexcusable is the word that comes to me. It comes to mind, and you got people that are diehards with Notre Dame, and if he loses another game, like it's going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly.
Yeah, he's 20-9 now. I saw Brian Kelly in his first 5 years total lost 9 games. So say what you want about Brian Kelly. And as we were saying earlier, last week it was Brian Kelly needs to be fired from LSU already after losing to USC. Now Notre Dame is saying fire Marcus Freeman. I mean, I think you can go back to, though, if Riley Leonard was his handpicked quarterback, you said he adds like the rushing dynamic, which he does, but through 2 games so far, 321 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I mean, that's inexcusable and it sounds funny to say this talking about a college guy, but for what they're paying him, which I've heard is north of $1 million in today's NIL space, that's inexcusable at all. And you got to consider too, one of those games is as a home 28-point favorite to Northern Illinois. I mean, that can't be the ideal start for Notre Dame at all for what they were expecting from them. And I was even listening to something yesterday, and they're talking about the Notre Dame beat writers and whatnot, talking about turning to Steve Angeli, who was the former quarterback at Bergen Catholic. If this passing game doesn't pick up, they might have to try something else, because it really is playoff or bust, and they probably have to go 11-1 now to make the 12-team playoff.
Which would mean they'd have to win 10 straight games.
Yep. Including USC, which I was down on USC, but that's a shutout last week. I don't care if it was against Utah State and for what they did week 1 against LSU. USC's looking damn good to start as well. So Louisville's on that schedule too, who's not a cupcake. They got some tough games. And
Georgia Tech, Army.
Tech, yeah. You never know. You just lost to Northern Illinois. All bets are kind of off. Anyone can compete with you.
Oh, sorry, Mark. We're having some fun, and he was definitely upset on the daily tickets as well. But we got to roll on. All right, from Notre Dame fumbling the bag, the Fighting Irish dropping it. Good grief. Let's go ahead and we'll take it from the start of the day and the big picture for me. Beef, like, I saw Joe Tanzi, and Joe deserves credit because he said something along those lines about Riley Leonard didn't really move the needle for him. So maybe he was on to that before everybody else. I thought Riley Leonard was a little bit better of a quarterback than what he's shown us so far. So I want to give credit a little bit to Joe there, but I also want to say, and I'm putting words into his mouth, but he did tweet this, and it got me. Like, I don't know how you could see some of these games, albeit we're only at September 9th right now, and we're 2-3 games in for some, and not say that like there's more to this season other than Ohio State and Georgia. And Ohio State and Georgia have been great. But how did you watch Texas just smash Michigan at the Big House with a noon kickoff, with anybody and everybody watching? College game day there. Like, everybody was paying attention to that game. And Texas did not sweat one moment. If you were laying the 7, there wasn't a point in that game that you were like concerned. I maybe for me, and I didn't have any action on the game. That's the way I looked at it. But how can you look at that game and not say Texas, who had great success last year, building a program. Sark, pretty damn good coach. Quinn Ewers very well could win the Heisman Trophy and not put them in the conversation to win a national championship. What am I missing there, Beef?
Yeah, for sure. That was my, I think, biggest takeaway from the weekend, that if you're going to be talking 1 and 2 with Georgia and Ohio State, and I think coming into the year, Oregon was kind of lumped into that category as well. Definitely drop Oregon and put Texas up there, because calm, composed. I mean, that game, as you said, wasn't a sweat at all. I think it was the first drive Texas had. It was 3rd and 13. The building was jumping, and it looked like, Wink Martindale was going to be bringing the blitz and the pressure all day. Quinn Ewers steps up, makes a really nice throw on 3rd and 13, and it was kind of off to the races from there. You said it best, that they didn't drop an inch of sweat. That game was just easy from start to finish. And I've never been a big Sark guy. Last year was the first year as a head coach he ever won double-digit games in college, which I still think is pretty mind-boggling. But he has improved and improved and improved as a head coach, and I think that's like a rarity. Like, I feel like as a coach, you kind of are what you are more times than not, and he's found a way to improve. And when you look at Quinn Ewers, you can put his experience up there with just about anyone in the sport. So when you have a really good, experienced head coach who's the play caller and a really experienced quarterback, and this is a team that won the Big 12 last year, went to the college football playoff, they got the taste, they have a lot of returning guys, and you can argue one of the top 5 offensive lines in the sport as well. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna be winning football games if you kind of line up that combination. Good at the line of scrimmage, good quarterback, and good head coach. So Texas certainly deserves to have the respect on their name as a national title contender, and to go up there to Michigan, who I think we all can agree is probably going to be more of a 8-4 than a 11-1 team this year. But still, to go into the largest environment in all of college football and do that, that's a statement performance right there.
All right, Beef sent me his 10 things that we learned from college football week 2. So with that being said, we did just hit on Notre Dame. As he pointed out, they are who we thought they were. We hit on Texas. They deserve to be talked about in Georgia OSU conversation. That's number 2 on your list. I want to get to your 9th item on the list here as we're just knocking them down. And that is over to the Tennessee Volunteers and the Nico Mania that is happening right now, because that kid is special and that offense is special. Now, the defense really opened my eyes, but how good is NC State? So we got to be fair about that. However, that game they put clearly out of the way in the second half, and it didn't matter because Tennessee scored 51 points and NC State wasn't going to ever come close to that. But game goes over the total. Tennessee covers the big number. I think 9.5. Game was played in Charlotte, which is lucky for NC State, because if that game was played at Rocky Top, that might have been an 80-point or 60-point, 50-point or 70-point victory, whatever it may be. But Nico is the real deal. That offense, and of course Heupel and what he brings to the table, they spread you out, they run and gun, they run the football, great play calling. There's just a lot to like about Tennessee. And at this point in time, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that team should be in the conversation for winning it all. But if they do make the playoffs, and I would be, look, as we sit here right now, long way to go, I'd be surprised if they don't. However, we'll see how it plays out. I do believe that they could beat a Georgia in a playoff game. I do believe that they could beat a Texas in a playoff game. I do believe that they could hang with an Ohio State in a playoff game. Just from what I've seen so far, I'm really excited about what the future holds. Nico is the real deal. There's a lot to like from Tennessee. Where do you stand on them right now?
Yeah, they put up 51 points, and Nico threw 2 interceptions. I think that goes to show you how good and explosive that offense can be. Completely dominated the line of scrimmage as well. Offensively, ran it 44 times for 249 yards. I mean, that's just a gut punch right to the face of NC State. And then they held them to 28 carries for 39 yards as well. That defensive front for Tennessee is legit. I think Heupel needs to be talked about as one of the arguably top 5 coaches in the sport. You saw what he did with Hendon Hooker 2 years ago, a guy that was able to just simply throw the ball downfield and complete passes at an accurate level compared to what Joe Milton did last year. But you saw how good they were when he had a guy that was able to run the system. Now you bring in a quarterback like Nico who can run the system but can also add the ad-lib plays. You have the really strong defense, especially on the defensive line, and you can run the ball as well. I mean, it's a complete squad. You just have to kind of worry, I think, as good as Nico can be, 2 interceptions. You get into these closer games with a Georgia, with an Alabama. You can't be turning the ball over. It's a young quarterback as well, not nearly as experienced as a guy like Will Howard at Ohio State, or like Carson Beck, or like Quinn Ewers, guys like that, where maybe this is the year where Tennessee just making the playoff, that's a success. You lose to one of these more experienced teams, and then next year you enter the year as potential like the title favorite. I think that's kind of the goal and what Tennessee should be looking at this year. But looking at their schedule, Kent State this week, that'll be a blowout. They're one of the worst teams in the country. I think they lost to St. Francis, an FCS school this week. It was one of those
Can we
lower
lay the 49?
Yeah, I mean, so that's what I was getting to as well. The next week, Oklahoma. That's really going to be the first kind of test at Oklahoma. I think this is a game starters are out by halftime for Tennessee, probably. But if they win that game at Oklahoma, they still have 2 tough games, I think, on the rest of the schedule. They have Alabama coming to Knoxville, and then they go to Georgia 2 or 3 weeks later. So if they win that Oklahoma game, it's a 10-win team at minimum. I think 11-win team ceiling-wise if you get the split there with Alabama and Georgia. But 10-2, I think, will for sure get you in. 11-1, you're probably headed to the SEC title game.
Yeah, that's a great schedule to put what I said as far as the college playoff matchup, to the side, because we're going to get an opportunity to see what those 2 teams look like on the same field. And one on the road in Georgia, as you said, between the hedges, and of course one at home when Alabama rolls into Knoxville on the 19th. You're not going to that game, are you? What game are you going to?
I'm going to Kentucky, but if they win that Alabama game, it's a bye. After that, like Tennessee could be number 2 team in the country going into that game, number 3 team in the country, because it's Oregon and Ohio State would have already played by then. If Ohio State loses Oregon, like they're probably going to be top 5 at least. So it's going to be buzzing in Knoxville, I think, come November.
Yeah, that's definitely not going to be a boring trip by no means. Even though Kentucky, they got some work to do down there.
Yeah.
All right. Again, I loved what I saw, and it was a lot of fun just to enjoy that game. And I think I had a little bit on the over on this dumb contest that I'm in, where you put some shares up. But other than that, it was pretty frustrated because I'm in another competition where you got to pick one college, one NFL spread. And I talked myself out of that game, and I was very frustrated, and instead talked myself out of the big number. And then I went into Kansas, and really disappointed with that game. And, Daniels, for me, let's transition over that, and that's on your list as well. I just expected for him to be a little bit more with the athleticism on top of hitting some big-time passes, and it wasn't the case. I'll give credit to Illinois. They played well at home, but, I just thought that was a very winnable football game, and it disappointed by the performance by the Jayhawks. And maybe Daniels isn't as good as what I thought he was going into the season. What was your takeaway from that game?
Yeah, I think one of the more disappointing offenses to start the year for sure. First game of the year, they played Lindenwood, which was an FCS team. I think it was 49-0. So can't really read much into that. But even through 2 games now, I mean, with Illinois as well, only 289 passing yards, 3 TDs, and 4 interceptions, and he only has 35 rushing yards and no rushing touchdowns. This is a guy that is another one of these really experienced quarterbacks, really athletic, a tough matchup, but I really think he's missing the play caller, Andy Koldenicki, who went over to Penn State to take the same job as the OC there. We're seeing the kind of success that they've had with explosive plays thus far through 2 weeks at Penn State. Jalen Daniels, seems to really be missing that. So I feel like that's one of the teams that isn't being talked about that much because so many other bigger picture things are kind of happening. But they were a touchdown favorite in that game at Illinois. And I think we kind of expected on the show for Kansas to be kind of in that 8-4 to 10-2 range and maybe compete for a spot in the Big 12 title game. So Kansas has been a disappointment so far, and they get UNLV on Friday night. UNLV is a damn good Group of 5 team, the Mountain West. They rolled against Houston, and Houston put up a really good fight this week against Oklahoma, who's a ranked team. And then UNLV won big this week, and I forget off the top of my head who they played, but they won again. I think UNLV could upset Kansas potentially in that game as well.
All right, we'll keep going on your list here. Number 6, Oregon overhyped. Yeah, absolutely. Defensively, without a doubt. They're in trouble on the defensive side of the ball. I saw Idaho take it to them, be more physical on going up against their defense, and last week against Boise State on Saturday. If it wasn't for the special teams kickoff return, Oregon could have very well lost that game. And quite frankly, I think they were going to. But who knows? That offense is nasty, though. Gabriel slings it, there's a lot to like about Oregon, but I just have to trust my eyes right now, Beef, and they have issues. And if they go up against a team like Ohio State, they might not stop scoring. If they go up against Ohio State's going to Oregon, right? I believe.
Yeah.
I know that we'll see something different, but if you get the type of performance that you did from the defense on Saturday night against Boise and the previous week against Idaho, it's a wrap. It is a wrap. Oregon is not on the same level as some of those top dogs. Again, long way to go, but just off of what I've seen so far, I'm questioning how good Oregon really is after it's all said and done this year.
Yeah, I think at the line of scrimmage is the biggest thing. The reason why I think people were so high on Oregon as they transition into the Big Ten is because they had been kind of recruiting like a Big Ten SEC school over the past few years and building up those trenches. And the offensive line was worrisome in week one. I think they gave up 3 sacks in week one. They gave up 5 sacks the entire season last year, and that was 3 sacks against Idaho. So that's pretty startling there. And as you said, the defense, Gentry is a wild man at the running back spot for Boise State. But still, to give up 192 yards and 3 touchdowns to a back at home as an 18.5-point favorite, that game came down to the end. I remember texting you, should I take a shot here on Oregon at plus money? They were plus money midway through the fourth quarter. So that just kind of goes to show you that they're not clicking on all cylinders right now. Another team that missed a lot of guys or graduated a lot of guys, and they're trying to patch up through the portal. Not exactly, linear comparison to Florida State, but that's what Florida State did too. Oregon was able to pull through with a couple wins so far, but definitely looking overhyped for sure. We all had them in that first kind of top tier category with Georgia and Ohio State, and I would definitely put them down, as through 2 games into a third tier. I'd have Georgia, Ohio State, Texas probably in one, middle tier Alabama, Ole Miss, probably Miami. And then you start working in some next teams in another tier. They've been
Tennessee not in that middle tier.
I'd probably still have Tennessee in the Oregon tier.
Okay,
you're 7 to 10-ish teams. But I think it is. If you're an Oregon fan, your hand is hovering above the panic button. This week we'll find out a little bit more against Oregon State, who 2-0 to start the year. I don't think they're exactly world beaters, but we'll learn a lot more about them this week and see, is it a fluke or is this, legit concerns for the Ducks?
All right. And looking forward to this one here. Give me my theme music. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, let's talk about Colorado. Getting smashed by Nebraska. That was fun. And look, this is what we discussed. It's Deion's good for the game. Right, to a point, because I think we're learning some things now that kind of I don't really sign off on. I think it's kind of weird. I always thought that, yes, this is what the name of the game is. It's transition, improve. Colorado is not going to be the final stop, although Deion's not very good. He's not a really good head coach as far as clock management is concerned. I thought for sure he'd be an unbelievable recruiter after last year, and maybe that might play out, but I don't know what happens after Shedeur leaves and of course Travis Hunter leaves. I don't know if Deion stays. I really don't. I think it's a wild card at this point in time because it was ugly against Nebraska. And Shedeur, I still think is a pretty good quarterback. I still think he's going to be drafted extremely high, and so is Travis Hunter. But man, other than that, the cupboard is bare. And I thought they were going to improve across the board this year. But man, that game against Nebraska got away, and it got away in a hurry, Beef. Ugly performance by the Colorado Buffaloes. But I really want to talk a little bit about Nebraska and Dylan Raiola, who looks pretty good, and that team is grooving right now. So give me a note on Nebraska and then close up shop on Colorado as well.
Yeah, I guess my take going into that game and why I love Nebraska so much, and I guess you could probably look at most games that Colorado have this year, but top two players, I think everyone would agree, would be Shador and Travis in that game. But then you go players 3 to 10, it was Nebraska for sure. Like the depth and the overall team that they have so much better than what Colorado brings to the table. And you could have, after that pick six to start the game, you could have, put your house on Colorado or on Nebraska money line from there. Like that was no doubt about it. And the atmosphere, it's insane. I heard today Nebraska's had like over 300 straight sellouts, and for a team that's been in such mediocrity, they haven't gone bowling since 2016. They are starving. They are really wanting this winner. And I'd heard Rule say something pretty crazy today. He said how impressed he is with Raiola so far. He said he told the team, the offensive team, you guys got to step it up. Like this kid is the legit. He's the real deal. And he's like, you guys aren't doing what you're supposed to do, which is kind of holding us back. Like he thinks there's another level that this entire team can take it to. The defense was awesome last year. I mean, they held their opponents to under like 17 points, I think in 9 of their 12 games or something. Like the defense is legit. All Raiola had to do was come in and be, average, not turn the football over. And that would be a 7-5 to 8-4 team at worst. This is looking like a legit 10-win squad, going to be undefeated. Be very surprised if they weren't heading into the Columbus game against Ohio State. So Nebraska is here. They're ready for this. And Colorado, though, a mess. I think it's going to get uglier before it gets better out there in Boulder.
Dating back to last season, Nebraska's defense continues to be great, allowing 24 points or less in 9 straight games. So that's pretty good there, to say the least, about Nebraska. All right, some other odds and ends just as far as performances from last weekend, week 2. James Franklin and Penn State got a little dicey there, 34-27 final score. Your takeaway from that game?
Yeah, it wasn't a game I had on that much. I was kind of just poking back and forth, but they figured out a way to get it done. That was when I was watching the beginning of the Notre Dame game. I was like, oh, this is probably going to be, the similar story. Like the MAC team kind of hangs around after Notre Dame gets the big win week 1, Penn State gets the big game week 1, and then it's kind of a look ahead, take your foot off the gas a little bit against a MAC team. Penn State, credit to them, able to finish it at the end of the day, unlike Notre Dame. But Nick Singleton, I think, would be the big takeaway. He's looking like the freshman year. Nick Singleton has already had multiple 40-yard touchdowns, and he didn't have a single 40-yard touchdown all of last year. And that goes back to new play caller Andy Koldenicki. Hurts Kansas and Jalen Daniels as he leaves, but he's really helping this Penn State team. And Nick Singleton looking like one of the best backs in the country again.
All right, Oklahoma State barely beating Arkansas. I thought Arkansas was going to win that game. Goes to overtime. Everything happened for Oklahoma State. They came out on top. I think 39-31 was your final score in that one, if I'm not mistaken, 39-32, something like that. Anyways, your takeaway from that game?
Arkansas gifted it to them. They gave Oklahoma State 4 or 5 chances to win, and Oklahoma State finally gets it done in the end. I was high on Oklahoma State coming into the year. They were my Big 12 champ. Ollie, to me, looks slow. I mean, all the carries he had last year, all the volume of touches that he got, he looks slow and kind of beat up. That's a really good offensive line, supposedly, in front of him. He doesn't look like he has much burst, so I'm a little bit worried about that because the passing game with Bowman is kind of inept. He'll step up and make some throws, but that team was really kind of, born and bred on being able to feed Ollie Gordon the ball 25 times a game. They might have ran him into the ground a little bit too much last year. So he got to pick up his game. He hasn't been impressive so far, but I think Arkansas too, going to be like a fun, spunky team this year. They might be 6-6, but I think they have the offense to beat some teams and pull off some upsets, but the defense and the coaching is ultimately going to hold them back.
All right. And then we got some other items from some games here that I want to discuss, but we'll go ahead and hit the gas pedal a little bit here. I don't want to get too much because we're going to be recording on Wednesday night as far as the upcoming week, as far as games are concerned. But right from the jump, this was interesting to me. Arizona, 9 in a row. I believe that's the longest winning streak in the nation. And they have a pretty good game coming up here on a Friday against Kansas State. Kansas State a 7-point favorite, but we're talking about a team that knows how to win a game here. So early look at that game. And what is your takeaway so far for 9 in a row with Arizona?
Yeah, was really surprised to see that open up at 9. Arizona had a bit of open up at 7. 9 was in my head from the wins in a row, but Arizona didn't play that well against Northern Arizona this past week. It was only 22-10, so that was a little weird. In Kansas State, Tulane had a play at the end they took the lead. It got called for like a pick play, and they were probably going to go for 2 and had a chance to win it there against Kansas State at the end. So Kansas State hasn't been impressive to start the year. My guy Avery Johnson hasn't looked that great. The offense is kind of boring to watch. A lot of like horizontal stuff. I think they got to get more down the field stuff. But I really like Arizona in that one, plus the 7. I think they are they might have played a little bit vanilla last week, knowing that they had this matchup coming up. One thing to note on this matchup, though, 2 Big 12 teams, but this is a non-conference game. This was a series agreed to a few years back. So it's actually a non-conference game. So that actually has a big impact going forward for the standings, as I expect these 2 teams to be in the race for the Big 12 title. But Arizona plus 7 as of right now, I really like that. And I think we could get a lot of points in that game too. A fun Friday night game, potentially hitting the over there.
All right. And staying in the state, Arizona State, the Sun Devils, they're a 1.5 favorite over Texas State on Thursday, 7:30 p.m. It's the only game in college football on Thursday night. No, we have a NFL game. You know the Thursday night NFL game?
Yeah, Bills Dolphins. But you also got Thursday. It's like Southern Alabama versus some Baptist school too. I think I saw.
So we'll look for that line on Thursday as well. But hear me out on this one, because Arizona State put it on Mississippi State and Tempe. You were on the over on that one, weren't you?
Yeah, didn't hit.
It didn't hit? What was the number?
57. Closed at 53, or 53 was the final.
Oh, good grief.
The sad end to the night.
Yeah, I would say so. A couple more twisted tees got popped, or what?
Nah, those were McClay's. He was done by then.
All right. Well, the look ahead spot, because they got Utah next week. So this could be a possible trap spot for Arizona State. Your thoughts on that one, and anything for Thursday night?
Texas State's legit. They are one of the group of 5 playoff contenders, I think, for sure. They absolutely worked UTSA last week. I don't know the exact final, but I think I saw at one point it was like 49-3. And UTSA has been one of the better group of 5 schools with Jeff Traylor running the show over the past 5 or so years. So that was a eye-popping, impressive performance. Shout out G.J. Kinney, former Eagles practice squad quarterback. He is the head coach at Texas State. He's not going to be there for long. He's going to be a Power 5 coach maybe as soon as next year. But that's a fun Texas State team that definitely can win that game outright. Arizona State only being a 1.5-point favorite. It's pretty eye-popping, considering they were a 6.5-point favorite last week against Mississippi State, albeit a bottom-tier SEC team, but still an SEC team. Now you're only a 1.5-point favorite at a Sun Belt team. I think that's saying to me that Texas State's going to win that game. So I think I'm going to take them on the money line in this one.
All right. And just a little bit here as we dip our toes into the weekend water here as far as the games. The only matchup that we will have as far as 2 teams ranked on Saturday, Boston College and Missouri. Is that correct?
Yeah, just like everyone expected, week 1.
Yeah. That's a tough one. But Arizona's 20th ranked, Kansas State 14th ranked. So that game is going down on Friday. So we don't want to look past that one, as we said. Alabama, Wisconsin at noon. It's an interesting game there. Game being played at Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's a big noon kickoff game. I thought Alabama could have been on upset alert in that one, but Wisconsin has been, I think, brutal through 2 weeks. Tyler Van Dyke is not a good football player. I think we can just plain and simple say it like that. We've seen enough snaps from him now. I think that's a game that Alabama can go in there and win by 3 touchdowns.
All right. Anything for you with the 16.5-point spread in Corvallis with Oregon State?
I got to look more into Oregon State. Their week 1 opponent was no one, but then they beat San Diego State 21-0, and San Diego State usually a pretty respectable program. I want to look a little bit more into them, see kind of where their strengths lie, because that was a team that had a real mass exodus after the Pac-12 folded, and they didn't get a new conference, head coach left and everything. So I got to look a little bit more into that, but I think that's a little insulting to Oregon. Like, it goes to show you kind of what Oregon's looked like through these couple weeks, that they're not at least a 3 touchdown favorite in that game.
Interesting. All right. And game day is in South Carolina. 7-point spread. LSU favored against the Gamecocks. 50s are total. That's a noon kickoff as well.
Yeah, South Carolina's defense might be legit. I think that's going to be another kind of South Carolina a threat or a player potentially. I mean, people were putting them in the grave last week after only beating Old Dominion by 4, and then LSU had a going into the fourth quarter a tough game with Nichols of all schools. So they struggled to run the ball. Their running back is actually out for the year with a torn ACL. He tore it in the USC game. So South Carolina's got a good defense. I think that might be an under type game. We see a live dog there potentially too with the Gamecocks.
Wow, and Georgia's a 24-point favorite against Kentucky. Game being played in Kentucky. Is this a little bit of a bounce back spot for Kentucky? That's seems a little light after that performance against South Carolina.
Found a stat today on Mark Stoops after a loss since he took over at Kentucky. Only 24 and 34 against the spread. It was like a 44% cover rate. So his teams haven't really bounced back, and that was a putrid performance last week. Brock Vandergriff, I think he threw for 30 yards was his final line. I mean, and the week before was Southern Miss, and they only won like 31-3. So I think that's one that gets ugly. People are going to kind of jump at that number and be a little bit surprised at that. But Georgia absolutely steamrolled them last year by 30, and I don't think this year will be any different.
All right, Beef. We'll close up shop on this one. Give me your top 3 as far as Heisman Trophy right now. If you were to vote, top 3, where do you stand as far as Heisman Trophy voting is concerned?
I think you have to put Ewers at 1 as of this moment because of what he just did against Michigan. Number 2, I'd probably give it to Cam Ward because of what he did week 1. And then last week still, he put up over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then number 3, I'd put Jackson Dart. Ole Miss hasn't played anyone yet, but he started out 20 of 20 last week. He only had 1 passing touchdown. Didn't light the world on fire with his touchdowns last week, but he's going to put up numbers all year. And I listened to this one podcast, or it's on like TikTok, but I see the clips all the time. It was a guy that worked for Lane Kiffin, and he's like, trust me when I say this, he's going to do everything he can to get Jackson Dart the Heisman. Like, he's going to put up numbers. These guys are going to be playing late in games. Look for Ole Miss to be a team that covers as large favorites all year. Like, pedal to the metal, foot on the gas. So I think that's certainly something to monitor. And right now, Dart and Ward are both plus 800, I think, to win the Heisman. I'm holding both those tickets, one at 22-1 and one at 14-1. So
nice.
Looking good there so far.
Yeah, Ewers right now at 6-1. First of all, the 3 you laid out are top 3 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Ewers at 6-1, Cam Ward plus 800, Jackson Dart plus 850. Then it goes back 10-1, Gabriel 11-1, Nico 12-1, Milroe 12-1, and Miller Moss 18-1. Like long way to go. So I would sit here and I'd have to give respect to Cam Ward. Cam would be in there. No doubt about it. Quinn Ewers is going to be my number 1. I've just been blown away with Nico. So I would slide him up a little bit and I'd probably pop him in on number 3. Probably a little unfair to Carson Beck. And maybe a little bit Jackson Dart and just a little bit, but still just 2 to 3 weeks into this season. So nobody's going too crazy here, but Quinn Ewers at 6-1 to win the national championship. And again, that's well before that's going to be right. That's going to be handed out before the playoffs start.
Yeah. It gets handed out the week after the conference championship.
Okay. So right now, Georgia's plus 280 to win it all. Ohio State plus 380. Texas is 5-1. What's a better bet in your mind? Texas to win it all or Ewers to win the Heisman?
I'd probably say Texas to win it all because
Really?
because these things fluctuate and jump so many different. Like, there was a point last year where JJ McCarthy was the favorite for like 3
True.
weeks. I mean, these things go up and down. Daniels was even with a few weeks to go, like still like 10-1. Like, Quinn Ewers could fall back at some point to like 12-1 if he has a down game or something, and you can maybe get him at a better price. I think Texas at 5-1 probably better because I think there's more of a limited teams that could win the national title compared to the Heisman. Because I think we can go and look through the Heisman list and probably rattle off 12 players, I'd say, and I think they all have a legit shot. I mean, Ewers, Ward, Beck, Dart, Gabriel, Milrow, Nico, Miller Moss, if he continues to play well, Will Howard. There's more guys I think that can win the Heisman Trophy than win the national title, if that makes sense.
All right, excellent stuff across the board. Ryan Beef Coyle, fantastic job. And college football, we are off and running here. A lot of great games this weekend. Don't get too down. I get it. Nothing really as far as top 5 opponents going head to head, but still, college football is back front and center in our lives. And I enjoyed just bellying up and hanging out on the couch literally from 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the morning. And hopefully I got a few more Saturdays in my future doing exactly that. Any final thoughts before we get out of here on a Monday?
That's it. We will talk to you Wednesday night, and looking forward to putting out some more winners. Been pretty hot to start the year in college football.
Yeah, man, really are. And great job on the Big Brain podcast between you, Tansy, and Mark Henry Jr. A lot of great numbers coming in there, and you guys will be live tomorrow night. So looking forward to hearing that. We'll definitely have it podcasted at foxphlgambler.com and on the air throughout the course of the week as well. So be sure to follow us on socials. For Ryan Beef Coyle, I'm Sean Brace. Everybody, good luck on your plays. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.